Hello, everybody. Welcome into SportsDay Insider, presented by the Dallas Morning News. I am Kevin Sherrington, joined by my pals, Grant and Joe Hoyt. Joe's going to come on and talk to us about his latest mock draft, as well as several trade possibilities for the Cowboys. At this point, I think we could all say that Jerry Jones is very likely to make a deal, whether that's going up, going down, whichever way he wants to go. Later on in the podcast, obviously, we'll also talk about the Rangers start. But for right now, we'll jump right in here with Joe. So, Joe, let me say this first of all. You had your mock draft 3.0. How much different is that from 1 and 2?
There are some differences, especially when it comes to the Cowboys. There was a significant difference when it comes to the Cowboys. There's someone that I had been mocking them. I mocked them, Jermon McCoy, the cornerback from Tennessee, the first two mock drafts with the pick number 12. After talking with some people and just kind of reading the tea leaves about what they might want, I don't envision that. So I made some changes. Would you like me to go through the draft, the 1 through 12?
Well, let's go over those first 12 picks and see what you got, and just briefly on each one of those as you lead up to the Cowboys' first pick.
Yeah, first one, it's going to be chalk. Fernando Mendoza, obviously to India, to Vegas. I just, that's been obvious for a long time. The second one is where the draft, I think, really starts, and I think it comes down to David Bailey or Arvell Reese for the New York Jets. I think they need an impact guy who can get after the quarterback. Aaron Glenn was at Texas Tech Pro Day. I was there. I think they take David Bailey, the edge rusher from Texas Tech. I think his get off is just fantastic. He brings some juice. I think that'd be exciting for them. Arizona is so interesting, and we'll talk more about trade stuff. I think they do want to trade back because they have so many needs. I think that they could be a spot for Jeremiah Love. I think they could take the next edge rusher at 3. I even think they could take Sonny Styles. But I have them taking Francis Mauigoa to kind of give them 2 first-round pick tackles and support whoever plays quarterback for them. At 4, another spot for the Jeremiah Love potential train. Instead, I go Arvell Reese. I think Robert Saleh, as a defensive guy, does that. 5, this is now the second consecutive mock draft where I have Caleb Downs, the safety from Ohio State, going to the New York Giants. It's a little high. Safety's not one of the more valuable positions, but I think Caleb Downs is, in my opinion, my favorite player in this entire class. I think he's so good. If he fell to 12, which we can talk about, I think Cowboy fans would jump for joy. Here he goes to one of their rivals. 6, another spot where the Cowboys could trade up with Cleveland. I think they take Monroe Freeling, but I do the Georgia offensive tackle. It's a little high for him. I think that they might want to trade back and get him. Another guy there potentially is Carnell Tate. 7, Sonny Styles to Washington's second consecutive mock draft. I have that. That means that once again, I have the Giants and Commanders, 2 rivals for the Cowboys, taking perhaps the Cowboys' 2 favorite prospects in this draft, and Caleb Downs and Sonny Styles. Kellen Moore and the Saints at 8, I have them getting Carnell Tate. Number 9, Kansas City, I have them taking Kenyon Sadiq to have an heir apparent to Travis Kelce. 10, Cincinnati, Jeremiah Love. They were at his pro day. I found that kind of interesting. I think that would be an interesting spot for him, and maybe where his floor ends up ultimately being. 11, Miami, I have them taking Mansoor Delane, the cornerback from LSU. 1 spot away from falling to the Cowboys. I think he'd be perfect for Dallas. And then I have Rueben Bain, the pass rusher from Miami, going to the Dallas Cowboys with the 12th overall pick. One of my big takeaways from owners' meetings, edge is more of a want and potentially necessity than I originally thought.
Oh, no question about that, Joe. I think it is. And it needs to be, right? I mean, it's the most important position on defense, and the Cowboys lack that ever since they traded Micah Parsons to Green Bay. So let me ask you this before we get into the particular needs, because I'm really interested in the difference in your mind between David Bailey and Arvell Reese.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think with David Bailey, it's just I think true pass rusher, right? I think someone who's more of a speed guy. I think his superpower is his get off. He's like a shot out of a cannon every time I see him. I do think that there's some limitations in terms of his ceiling and a little bit of some of the pass rush moves. I also think he benefited a lot from having guys around him at Texas Tech that were fantastic. That kind of allowed him to take more risks. Arvell Reese is just, I think, in terms of potential, off the charts. And I think it's fascinating because one of the big storylines from his pro day was his lack of bend, right? His and that's something that happens early on with pass rushers is that they're not used to that kind of thing. And it was a big storyline and went viral. A couple of days later, he was in DFW working out with Brandon Jordan, who's now the Cowboys pass rush consultant. And quickly, some of those bend issues looked like they were eradicated by BT Jordan, which kind of is telling about how much potential this guy has as an edge rusher. And honestly, day one, he could be a fantastic off-ball linebacker if you needed him to be. If there's a Micah Parsons like in this draft, they're different, but in terms of off-ball linebacker who also has potential to be an edge rusher, that is Arvell Reese.
All right, that's very interesting. So now let's look at it because according to your mock, now Rueben Bain falls to the Cowboys. Now, of course, we know the big knock on him is the short arms. He's the Tyrannosaurus Rex of this draft. So is obviously that would be part of the issue because as a player, with a motor and all the things he can do, and he's just nonstop in the entire game. He would go higher if he had 33-inch arms instead of 31. So would the Cowboys be content to have him, in other words, having not made a trade up and still be able to retain all their picks and end up with Rueben Bain? Is that a big win for the Cowboys, or would they feel like we don't really know if he's a great fit for our scheme?
I think it would be a good fit for the Cowboys because I think that if you listen to Jerry Jones talk, and I think I think it's so funny. Like Kevin, you've been following Jerry Jones a lot longer than me. Hearing Jerry Jones talk about wide nine techniques that can drop back in coverage was like a wild thing for me to hear. And like obviously he's the GM of a football team, like he should be able to say that, right? But like it was like talking about scheme stuff, I was like, okay, Jerry, and I tweeted it out. I mean, man, Christian Parker must be a heck of a teacher. And I think the fact that he was saying that stuff off the cuff is pretty telling. I think Rueben Bain's ability, he showed at a pro day that he could drop back in coverage, and that's not too much of a problem for him. I think, in my opinion, that would be a home run for the Cowboys to be able to get someone with that much power. That could get after the quarterback, pair him with the Donovan Ezra, who has a little bit more speed off the edge and kind of that, outside pass rush ability as well. So I think that'd be great. In order for this to happen, though, in order for the Cowboys to have some defensive guy that they want, they need 4 or 5 offensive guys to go in the top 11, which once upon a time kind of felt like impossible. Now it feels way more realistic than it did.
One more thing about him I want to ask you about. Now, DeMarcus Lawrence is a bigger guy than Bain is, but would his production level, with the kind of play he brings to the table, is it more like a DeMarcus Lawrence?
I don't think so because DeMarcus Lawrence was so interesting that he wasn't like a super power guy. He held his own in terms of holding the edge on run games. But I think more of his game was his just intelligence, his willingness to be, kind of to knife in and to make plays and to take risks. I think he was such a great gambler in terms of he knew where, his safe bets were and he made plays on them. So I think Bain is just so powerful. But I think he does have a little edge rush juice. I think they're a little bit different. But I think it's kind of funny because I think 2 edge rushers the Cowboys might like in this draft, Rueben Bain and Cassius Howell, are both guys with T-Rex arms in this draft, but also have some potential off the edge.
Yeah, Cassius Howell's another one. He is. I saw him play several times. Of course, he had one series where he had 3 sacks and 3 plays. So, obviously he has some, as you say, some juice too. All right, let's talk about potential trades now. So, if you were going to trade up, does it? In my mind, if you're trading to 2 or 3, if you're going that high, to get either the Jets or the Cardinals at that point, you just got to go with, in my mind, you just have to go with whoever's making you the best deal, right? Because I'd be fine with either Bailey or with Reese.
I think when it comes down to the Cowboys and potentially trading up, they need to be okay with multiple guys. Because to your point, I think there's a lot of different potential trade options. I'm sorry to break it to Cowboys fans. They're not going to move all the way up from 12 to 3 for just a 3rd round pick. I know that was a little bit of an internet rumor that made 0 sense. That's just not going to happen. If they want to go all the way up to 3, for example, I think at the very least they got to give up 12, 20, and 92 to do all that. And I think if you talk
Well,
about,
what if that's a first rounder next year, Joe?
I don't think that Arizona would want that. Actually, let me take that back. I think that they could, because they want a quarterback of the future, and next year's quarterback class is going to be really good. So maybe there is some ammo there. But I still think that it's going to take a lot. So I, I think if they're going to go up there, they got to have a couple guys in mind. I think they've had Arvell Reese in for a 30 visit. They got a chance to look at David Bailey up in close to Texas Tech Pro Day. They've had Caleb Downs and Sonny Styles in for 30 visits. I think the fact that they're doing their due diligence on all those guys is kind of telling that they might be more in like wait and see to see who falls and then pounce if they have to mode in terms of trading up. So I think more of a trade to 6 or potentially 9 is more realistic than 3.
I just don't see the Cowboys or Jerry Jones giving up enough draft capital to move that high to 2 or 3. I just don't think it's realistic based on the way Jerry has valued draft capital in the past. He loves to hoard picks. He doesn't like to give them up. So I don't know that it's realistic to think the Cowboys could jump into the top 5.
Evan, I'm glad you kind of brought that up, because that's something that's been on my mind recently. Again, this is now going to be my 4th season covering the Cowboys. I'm still learning a little bit of what's how to read exactly Jerry Jones, which I still think is maybe something that takes 30 years to fully understand. I think one thing I've kind of come to the conclusion, though, is that they would like to do a lot of different things, whether it's free agency, whether it's trade, but they do have their comfort zone. They have their boundaries. They set boundaries, right? And I think that if Arizona wanted to go all the way back to 12 for a 3rd round pick, they jump for joy and do it, right? That's obviously not going to happen. So I think that when they're sitting there waiting for the phone to ring from teams like Arizona and Cleveland, potentially Kansas City, maybe some others, they're only going to make a move if it feels comfortable for them. And I don't see a lot of scenarios where that actually is a comfort zone for them.
All right, so let me ask you this, Joe, on that front. Let's say the Cowboys are willing to do things differently. Let's say Jerry is willing to change his tack. Is 12, 20, and 92, is that a good trade to get into the top 3? Would you do that?
I wouldn't do it, no, because in theory, it's a good trade, right? In terms of value, all that stuff, it's a good deal. The idea of getting David Bailey or Arvell Reese on a rookie contract, there's value to that, right? I think there's too many holes on this defense to do that. And I also think, just from like a fundamental standpoint, you signaled a like continental shift in how you wanted to build your defense by trading Micah Parsons. I think then going out and trading 2 first-round picks and a 3rd-round pick for another pass rusher, that I think that's just contrary to what you've been kind of preaching that you want to do. I think that they need to get multiple guys. I'm very okay with them trading up from 12 to, let's say, 10 or 9 and using number 92, which was the Oso Digizua trade, to go get someone who had fallen, that they believe strongly in, while retaining pick 20 and still allowing them the ability to trade back if they want to and recoup another day 2 pick. That is more, if we're talking about like the dream scenario for the Cowboys, I think trading it from 12 to 9, getting a guy like Sonny Styles if he fell, or Caleb Downs, or Mansoor Delane, and then trading back from 20 to maybe, let's say 30 with Miami, getting another day 2 pick, still getting a guy like Jacob Rodriguez at 30, and then getting another, nickel corner like Keontae Scott, in day 2. Though that is more the home run scenario for me than trading all the way up to 3 for just David Bailey or Arvell Reese.
Now, I see all that, and I agree with a lot of it. I will say that Jerry Jones has traded up before, in up high, traded up high to get a cornerback once. So he has done that. The problem with Jerry is that when things don't work out, he has a tendency to say, "Okay, we're not doing that again," which is always a foolish thing to say.
Which trade are you talking about, Kevin? Because I've lost track. Which one?
Well, they took the cornerback, and of course I can't remember his name.
You talking about Claiborne from LSU?
That's it. Yes.
Yeah. And what did they traded multiple picks up to get him?
I don't remember what the trade was, but I believe he was the 6th pick. Was he not, Joe?
Okay. It was either 6 or 7. It was a top 10 pick. High expectations.
So they've done this kind of thing before. But my issue here is that, uh, as I said at the top, there is nothing more important than a pass rusher, right? That's why the trading Micah Parsons was not a good thing to do. But the Cowboys don't have one. They've got to get one. And I listen. I love Sonny Styles. I love Caleb Downs. I think both of those guys are great players. Mansoor Delane would be a great answer at cornerback. Those are all positions in need. There's no question about it. But in my mind, I was thinking about the Cowboys going after one of those guys only if there was no shot at a pass rusher. And to me, the three pass rushers are Bailey, Reese, and Rueben Bain. If I thought I could get one of those guys in this draft, and if they don't have to, if Bain falls to them, then that's super. And if you're able to get that, then that would be fantastic. But I think the Cowboys have to come out of this draft with a pass rusher. Now that if they like Cassius Howe and they get him at 20, and then okay, then great. If you think you can make him work, if there's something you see in him that it allows you to be a 3-down player for you, well then super, then that'd be great. But I think that they simply have to get that. I go back to what Babe Laufenberg said right as soon as the season was over. He said, "Here are the Cowboys' three priorities in the draft: a pass rusher, and a pass rusher." So it's the hardest thing to find in the NFL, and it's the most important thing. It makes everybody else better. I would like to have seen how much better the Cowboys' defense would have been last year, because in the secondary, if you're running around back there trying to cover somebody for 4 or 5 seconds, that's brutal. But if you're getting somebody to the quarterback and making him hurry, well, he makes everybody else in the defense better. So I think that no, I would not gut the draft this year. To Evan's question, I would not trade the 12, 20, and the 3rd round pick for a shot in the top 3. Would I trade a first round? Would I trade the 12 and next year's 1st round pick? I think I'd think about it, because what you're hoping is that next year you're going to be back in the playoffs, and that pick's going to be in the 20s somewhere. And I think if they do enough this year in defense, that they can do that, and then that pick's not nearly as valuable as the pick is this year.
Kevin, have you changed your perspective at all? I mean, because I know we spent so much time after the season ended talking about the draft, and we focused on defensive backs like Delane and Downs. Has your perspective changed? Were you high on defensive backs early and moved back to pass rusher, or had it been pass rusher all along?
Well, I didn't have pass rusher because I just thought at 12 they weren't going to get one. I just thought that was going to be it. Reese and Bailey would be gone, and Bain would probably be gone too. And so you're really kind of settling at that point. And I think that, as Joe has pointed out, they got to have a middle linebacker, and that's really important. And I think if they could get, fortunately for them, there's some out there, right? And Joe has written about Jacob Rodriguez from Texas Tech. I think he'd be terrific. I think that would be a really popular pick. They've got to have somebody play that position more than 2 years. It's been forever since they've had any stability at that position. So, and I think that Rodriguez could really give you that. And he's a really first-class guy, just in his personal life. So I think that that would be a terrific. So they've got to get out of this draft. They've got to get a starting middle linebacker. They probably got to get another cornerback, and they got to get a pass rusher in my mind. And that is a lot to get. How are you going to get all 3 of those things, all 3 starters out of this draft, Joe?
I will say, there is the potential to do that with all 3 of these picks, to get instant impact guys who could actually come in and play. I think if you look at edge rusher, for example, right? Let's say, at 12, let's say it's Rueben Bain, right? 20, maybe the option's Cassius Howe. At 92, the option might be Romello Height from Texas Tech, who they had for a 30 visit, right? Like there's potential in all 3 of those levels to get guys who could have some instant impact ability. Obviously, there's layers to that. Look at linebackers, same exact thing, right? 12, right now, I don't know if that would be the route. I'd be shocked. But let's say 20, you take a CJ Allen or a Jacob Rodriguez, right? 92. Maybe it's Kyle Lewis from Pittsburgh or something like that. There's instant impact guys there too. The one position that might be a little bit tougher with that is corner. But even so, like maybe you get a Chuck Demings from Stephen F. Austin, who's a Mesquite kid who has the ability to come in and play pretty quickly too. I think the one thing that they need to hit in this draft with all three of these picks is instant impact guys. If you look at right now their secondary, Deron Bland, injury issues. Savone Revel, injury concerns. Caitlin Carson, injury concerns. You have Kobe Durant coming in, in Kendricks, and we'll kind of see how they do. At linebacker right now, DeMarvion Overshown, injury concerns. Shamar James, TBD, right? Like that's their linebacker room as of now. They need guys who not only can come in and be instant contributors, but also guys that seemingly could stay healthy. That's why I don't have them taking a guy like Jamad McCoy anymore. I just don't think that they can afford the risk. They need to hit on these guys and have them contribute immediately in Christian Parker's defense.
No question about it, Joe. And let me say, let's reemphasize what you just said about McCoy, because that's interesting. And I think that Jerry has said that. And of all the things that Jerry says, which 90% you can't believe, is that we're not gambling anymore on people's health because of all the things I just said about you don't make decisions based on always on what happened in the past. Some things change and you can't just rule out possibilities. But look at how many times the Cowboys have taken guys who were hurt, guys that they knew had a condition of some kind, and used high picks on them first or second round, usually in the second round. And sometimes those guys were good players for a little while, but they didn't last. I mean, over the last 10 drafts, there's 5 guys like that, right? And you just simply can't be missing on those picks that high. I know Jerry's always tantalized by thinking that, if this guy hadn't been hurt, he'd have been a first round pick. And we got him in the second round, and that's so great. And okay, I get that, but he's hurt, and and when they're hurt, you just always, to me, that's got to be a big check mark against them going into this draft, especially when they still got guys on the roster like that, like Revel, as you pointed out, and guys who are still injury issues all along. They need somebody who's going to come in here and be a solid player right away. So we think that. So first of all, let me ask you this, Joe: do you think there's going to be anybody else they add through trade or through free agency that's going to make any kind of impact?
Before the draft, I don't think so. It's kind of hard to tell because I know that they've had preliminary conversations and interest elsewhere with some guys. I think that they have the George Pickens protocol is kind of what I'm referring to it as, the contingency plan, where at certain positions they have certain ways they're going to pivot if things don't work out in the draft. Just like they did last year when McMillan wasn't there and they pivoted to Pickens. I think that is real. I think that's something that they have in their back pocket, especially a linebacker. Obviously, there's some veteran free agents still out there. There's some potential trade candidates. I think that that's their kind of mode of operation when it comes to that position specifically.
Would you rule out Max Crosby altogether, not going there? They're not going to do that.
You never say never. I don't see them, kind of based off everything we just said to you, right? And obviously Max Crosby would be an instant impact guy, right? But also for how long? And I think the only way they do that, would revisit that, is if the trade compensation was nice for them, and if they believed that Max Crosby could be an elite pass rusher for the next 3 to 4 years to maximize Dak Prescott's window. That's the only way I see that happening. I think right now there's too many questions on both those fronts.
Yeah. Okay. All right, Joe. Great stuff as always, and we'll have you back the next 2 weeks leading into the draft to talk more about this, and we're going to try to attack it from different angles. We're going to get this thing hammered down that if Jerry Jones is listening to this, he's going to say, these guys are geniuses. I'm going with this. So, and Joe, take care of your dog, okay?
Will do.
All right, there goes Joe. Good to have him on to talk about this stuff. I'm always fascinated, by drafts, especially. There's just nothing that beats the NFL draft because you just get more players out of it than you do anything else in any other sport. If you're not getting at least a couple of starters out of a draft, well, I don't say at least a couple. I say you need 2 starters out of each draft. No other sport comes close to that. And basketball can't because you just have so few players, but still, that's what makes it fun. All right, let's talk about the Rangers, Evan. So,
Sure.
first thing I want to ask you is,
After you prattled on about the NFL draft, go right ahead. Talk about whatever you want.
rattled on. That's what.
Oh, the NFL draft.
So
I
when
love
you're,
Roger Goodell and everything that Roger does. It's great.
we just no. Did I say that? Did I say I
Yes.
love Roger Goodell? No,
Yes, you
I
did.
love the draft. Uh,
It's like
but
the
you're,
videos, the little
but you're
videos, Kevin.
of course causing us to prattle on without even getting to the Rangers. But whatever.
Let's
Uh,
prattle.
So the Rangers they start off the season 4-2, win the first two series on the road, then come back and completely fall on their face against the Reds in front of the home fans. So now, since we're taping this on Tuesday, they did come back by beating the Mariners in the first game, and that's a very important series. So that was big. That was a big comeback. But didn't you miss a golden opportunity here to start the season? You started off 4-2. Fans are dying to know, is this team different from the last two? And you come in here and you score 4 runs in 3 games. And it's just like, and then everybody just checking that off. I can't tell you the number of people I heard from checking it off, same old thing. I'm out. I'm not with you anymore. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not a devastating thing to lose that series to the Reds, but from a PR standpoint, you just blew a golden opportunity.
Well, you certainly had an opportunity when people were paying attention to show a difference. And look, I thought on Friday, the offense had 6 extra base hits, no home runs, but 6 extra base hits, which is something they didn't do very frequently last year. And I thought they used the ballpark better. It didn't produce a ton of runs that day. They faced some good pitching in the Cincinnati series, and they were swept. The things that I think would be concerning to me if I'm a Rangers fan is I don't know that I'd write off the offense after 3 days. They had 6 good days and then 3 not so great days. So I don't know that I'd write off the offense. I am still concerned about the bullpen, and I think there are changes afoot in the bullpen. I think Jakob Junis got the opportunity to close on Monday night, and I think he's going to get some more opportunities because he's been so good. I think Jacob Latz is going to be held back to be the last left-hander to be used out of the bullpen. So I think the Rangers are trying to address that. I just don't know that I'm willing to make any judgments on this offense after 10 games. I will say this, Kevin. Last year they were 8-2 after 10 games, and that included beating the Reds in back-to-back 1-0 games in Cincinnati. And then what happened the rest of the year. So I feel like the approach offensively has been better. I've gone back and I've looked at um, former Rangers hitting coach Clint Hurdle, obviously a manager for 2 teams in the big leagues, once told me about quality at bats. And he defined quality at bats as things that included hits, walks, hit by pitches, any way you reached base, but also 8 pitch at bats. And then I've added something else since we now have Statcast, which are line drives or fly balls off the bat at 100 miles an hour, and just tried to figure out who's getting what I consider productive quality at bats. And I think the biggest concern is that Josh Young has not really gotten a bunch of quality at bats. I think that shows up in every stat across the board. I think the one alarming thing is that Wyatt Langford has been off to a really rough start in the number 2 hole. I think part of that may be that he's having to adjust to being really attacked by pitchers now, as opposed to they just pitched around him, and if they walked him, it was fine in the past because the fourth opponents weren't really afraid of last year. They now have to get Wyatt out so that they don't face Corey Seager with multiple runners on base. And I think he's had a little bit of problem. The thing for me that stands out with Wyatt is he's had 9 strikeouts or 12 strikeouts and no walks so far. That's just not who Wyatt Langford is. And that's something that I think will be fixed. But offensively, I think there were questions about Jake Berger and Josh Young. And I think the questions about Jake Berger haven't been answered, but they've been very encouraging. The questions about Josh Young have not been answered in a positive way thus far.
Well, I would say that I think Jake Burgers have been answered. I mean, he was better at the end of last year, and he's been even better now. So I think he is turning into the player that they thought they were getting all along, and maybe even better than that player for the way he started so far. I mean, that's the thing. You can't. He's always been a streaky hitter. You can't expect him to maintain this pace, the rest of the season, and doesn't have to. I feel the same way about Wyatt Langford. He's not going to be this bad for the rest of the season. He's too smart, works too hard, too talented for that to happen. Is he going to put up MVP numbers? I don't know. Really, I don't care. I don't think it's really necessary. If he is just as good as he was last year, or maybe a little better, I think that's good enough. At some point, these other guys have to pick up their game too. They're not going to get it out of three guys. They're not going to get anywhere out of three guys. So I do think the concerns about Josh Young are real. I mean, the value there is just not showing up, and so they're batting him ninth now, and we'll see what that does. I don't think that does anything for him, frankly. It
I think
gets him.
I think batting him ninth. I think the fact that Ezekiel Duran has already started twice at third base. I think these are all messages, and
Oh
I
yeah,
think the Rangers are giving the opportunity to Ezekiel Duran to create more opportunity for himself. And he's doing a better job of seizing it than Josh is at this point in time. Now, maybe some of Josh's struggles early on were due to trying to rush back from the adductor muscle injury. Um, but what we're seeing happening, I feel like, is much more of a meritocracy being played out on the diamond. And Josh isn't playing all that well, and so there's some messaging going on that Duran will get some playing time, and that you're being slid down the lineup um, farther, and that may continue to grow in Duran's favor if he produces. And that's what meritocracy is about, right? If somebody produces, they play. If somebody doesn't produce, they don't play. The one thing I'm concerned about is this. You said Berger's a streaky hitter, and he is. And there's going to be a point in time where he kind of goes dark and is really in a slump for a while. Will Wyatt pick things up by then? Will Josh pick things up, or will Ezekiel Duran pick things up? And listen, let's not also go back on the third base thing and say that, hey, Zeke Duran is the answer either, because he's had opportunity and he hasn't really seized it in the past. So I don't know that we're going to see a player come out and be an all-star caliber third baseman, even if he does get more opportunity. I'm just
but
saying that,
but here's the problem though too in that if Zeke Duran, let's say he becomes your primary third baseman, well, what do you do with Josh Young? All he can play is third base.
right.
So now you cost yourself your utility infielder.
Yeah.
To me, if this thing doesn't work out with Josh Young over the next couple of months, I think his career with the Rangers is over.
Oh, I think very much his career with the Rangers is in question. Yeah, long term.
Yeah,
You know.
yeah, and that's a man. Who would have said that 2 years ago? I mean, of all the surprises about who has produced and who hasn't, I don't think there's anything bigger than that. I mean, there was a guy, a former first round pick, top 5 pick, guy makes a big splash when he gets here. He's an all star as a rookie, and then 3 years later, he might be
Yeah,
gone.
and I don't know how much of that has to do with the 2 broken bones he suffered in his hand. I don't know how much of it has to do with anything mental in terms of after he had those broken bones, and how his approach to the plate may have changed. But he just doesn't look very much in sync. I think I mentioned this to you last week at the home opener. Go back to Josh's first hit, which certainly got a monkey off his back in Baltimore, and he started out 0 for 18. But you go back and you look at that at bat, and he swings at a first pitch fastball that's above the zone, then takes a second pitch fastball in the heart of the zone for a strike. He's down 0-2. He does rally back. He does rally back to get it to 3-2, and then he singles up the middle to score a run, and that was important for him. But it's like, was that a great at bat, or was it, just circumstances happened to fall in his favor? Because it felt like he took the pitch he should have swung at, and he swung at the pitch he should have taken.
Yeah. Well, and I will say this: now Zeke is not a lot better either in his pitch selection here when he.
Well, that is the thing, Kevin, is Josh's best tool right now, as it plays out, is his defense. He's a good defender. He's a very good defender at third base as well. Zeke is a good defender at third base and at shortstop and at second base and can play the outfield. But with your third baseman, you're paying those guys to hit. You want good defense, but you'll deal with having a butcher at third base if the guy hits. You look across the diamond at Jake Berger, he's got legitimate power. He's going to hit 30 home runs if he plays 145 games. What is the thing you feel most confident about Josh Young doing if he plays 145 games? Is he going to hit 25 home runs? Is he going to hit 20 home runs? Is he going to hit 40 doubles? Is he going to have an on base percentage of 330? I don't know that you feel comfortable with any of those things. He's an average major league player right now, but and maybe that's all the Rangers need at third base. But I think that they're hoping that he's a better than average player, and that may be the decision they have to make is can they improve that position long term?
Yeah, it's a big question for them going forward. Let's talk about the pitching. So the starting pitching has been good, and certainly a little backwards the way it's worked. They're getting good performances out of everybody except the first two guys in the rotation. Although Jacob DeGrom came back with a very fine game in the first against the Mariners, giving up just one hit in 5 innings. Although that's really problematic when you hear that his knee was bothering him. Do we think that's a lingering issue?
Uh, I don't know. I mean, he had a sore knee. He apparently pitched through 5 innings, and the Rangers decided that they wouldn't push it anymore. Last night, I get a better feel at the ballpark today to see how it reacted after 5 innings and a night of potentially stiffening up. But yeah, I mean, every time anything with Jacob aches, whether it's his neck or his knee or more troubling his arm, you get a little bit concerned because he does have, as great an artist as he is on the mound and as beautiful as it is to watch him pitch, he's also got to be in perfect shape really to be able to do that. And too often there are things that crop up that may impact that.
Especially when you're 37 years old. So I want to say this, and I've said this all along. He doesn't have to be as great as he was last year. He shouldn't have to be as great as he was last year. Neither should Nathan Eovaldi. He's not going to have a 1.73 ERA this year. I'm going to make a wild prediction that doesn't happen again. To get in the playoffs and to go somewhere in the playoffs, you got to have more than just those two guys anyway. And if they can get some production out of the other part of the rotation, the back half of the rotation, and then of course most importantly, if they ever get their bullpen sorted out. So we saw in the ninth inning in that first series, as you noted, that Jakob Junis pitched. I've liked him all along. I never paid much attention to him before. He looks really good, throws strikes, has quality pitches. He's as good a candidate as anybody who's currently in the bullpen to be a closer in my mind. So this came up with a friend and reader the other day, and something that I brought up in spring training when I talked to Chris Young. Could you see at any point this year Kumar Rocker ended up being the closer?
Well, he just made a really good start to start his season.
I
um
know he made a really good start, but they've got options in the rotation. They've got
i
zero at closer.
I don't think the Rangers would. If Kumar Rocker is solid as a starting pitcher, I don't think that he's going to get looked at as the closer, at least not this year. I think the Rangers feel like there's too much invested in him, and there's too much of a future there for them to shift him to the bullpen. You never rule anything out, and certainly he was amenable to doing whatever the Rangers asked in that first week. But I don't think that is an option that's on the table right now. Because if it was on the table, I think the Rangers would have considered that going into the season.
No, I think
Um,
that. Let me just say this. Obviously, it's not a long-term solution, but as we've talked about, and you have talked about, what are they going to do in the bullpen? I mean, there's no one available right now for the them to acquire from outside the organization. There's no one in the organization who's currently a reliever who looks like he could fill that role. And you could fritter away your postseason hopes here in the 5 months leading up to the trade deadline if it gets bad enough. And in my mind, if there is an internal solution that's a temporary one, even if it's taking a guy out of the rotation, they've got other options there with Jacob Latz or with Cody Bradford coming back. There are certainly solutions for the rotation, and I'm not trying to diminish that and the importance of it in any way. It's just that these are desperate times for them.
But you've already got Jacob. You've got Jacob. I mean, this is the part I don't understand. You've got Jacob Latz as a very effective reliever in the bullpen, and he could be as good a candidate to close as anybody. I don't understand why the thought process would be to move Kumar into the closing role and move Latz back into the rotation. I think that if it's
Well,
working,
maybe you put Bradford in the rotation.
well, let's get to a point where Cody Bradford is healthy and effective. His first start didn't go well. Now it was in Round Rock. The wind was blowing about 40 miles an hour, but he's still got a month's worth of starts to make. And let's see where that is at the end of a month. Let's see where Kumar is at the end of a month. Let's see how the Rangers use the fifth spot, because I really think that you could get to a point in May where you do say, the fifth spot isn't as important as moving somebody into the bullpen, and then they do have to have this conversation all over again. But I know to this, Kevin, that every time this conversation has come up, it has been pretty much tamped down by Chris Young. This is a guy who believes in Kumar as a starter. I think what the Rangers have seen over the past month of him as a starter, since he's moved his arm slot back up, that he's really able to drive the ball downhill when he wants to with his sinker, and it gives a much more plain separation between the four seamer and the sinker, and it makes that slider play a little bit better as well. And the Rangers, the bottom line on all this, Kevin, is if you feel like a guy is a valuable starter, he's got more value than he does as a closer. That's the business proposition. What you're saying is right now the team's need is a closer, and Kumar has the best stuff to be a closer because he's got the highest velocity. And I think that's a conversation that's been had. I think it's a conversation that gets had over and over again. But I think as far as my experience has been, Chris Young is committed to him as a starter for the short term and for the long term.
Yeah, and I get that, and I understand it. It's just that, look, at this point, you can't run Chris Martin back out there anymore, can you?
I would not throw Chris Martin in the ninth inning anytime. Well, in the near future. Again, I think my perspective right now is that my last or highest leverage left-hander is Jake Latz. My highest leverage right-hander is Jakob Junis. Cole Winn probably becomes my seventh or eighth inning guy from the right-hand side, especially when you're facing a string of right-handed hitters. And then you figure Martin and Garcia. And Garcia had a nice inning last night. But it's going to take more than an inning here for everybody to kind of settle into roles. And we do have to also say that, while the bullpen performances have been shaky, even as uncertain as roles were going into the season or coming out of spring training, they were made all that much more uncertain in the first week when you had to scramble because Jacob deGrom missed his start and Latz had to move into the rotation for a start, and everybody had to scramble to fill innings. So um, the first week scramble, the start of the second week was not great. We've seen some changes in how the back end will be handled. I think that that's going to continue to be something in flux, but we're not even quite 10% of the way into the season. There is time for that to settle. And the one other thing I will leave out there is, look, there are some guys who throw better than average fastballs in the organization. And a lot of times when you are looking for a closer, because I think you and I have both been over the idea of, is it smart to spend $10 million or $20 million now on a closer? The best way to find a closer is from somebody in your organization. And when we talk about meritocracy, Luis Crivello is back up. He's going to get some opportunities to pitch in games. it's still a ladder. You got to work your way up. But Crivello has a better than average fastball. He was really impressive over the final part of spring training with no walks. There are other guys in the organization who have stuff, and it's up to them to make themselves known. For Mark Church to make himself known. I think Josh Spores is going to get an opportunity here in the next couple of weeks because he's got, I believe, an out in his contract come the middle of this month. There's a couple other minor leaguers lower down who were also injured. And that was the thing about spring training that stood out on the negative side, is that all the guys who were your potential power arms to help come through the system all seem to be hurt.
Yeah, no question about that. Well, we'll see how it comes out here. And it's going to be really imperative for it. And it's really a bad time to have a slow start for your bullpen because the season it just comes up on the Rangers so hard here. They got so many tough teams that had to play right away. And this is a big series with Seattle. They're going to play Seattle twice here this month. And so it's really imperative to get off to a good start with them and to play well against Seattle. So that's going to do it for our podcast this week. We appreciate you tuning in. We'll be back next week to talk more about the Rangers and the Cowboys. And we didn't even talk about the Final Four. I had Michigan beating UConn in my revised Final Four.
Oh, I had Michigan beating UConn in my reprised version too.
Did you really? Which was what, last night?
Yeah, about 9 o'clock last night.
It ended up being a better game than I thought it would be. I thought that Michigan would win by 15. So anyway, that'll do it. So from everybody in here to everybody out there, thanks, and we'll see you next time.